coping with climate change. So allow me to introduce our speakers today. Our first one is Laura DeDominicis, who is the Executive Director of Nurturing Minds, and the program we support at the West Foundation with Nurturing Minds is called the Sega Girls School, which is located in rural Tanzania. Nurturing Minds, Laura is the founder of it and also the executive director, and it exists to support quality education, life skills, and entrepreneurship for vulnerable girls in Tanzania. Laura has a really interesting background. She's also, I forgot to mention, the chair of the board of Nurturing Minds, and she has a 30-year background in poverty alleviation, working with startups and well-established organizations to help improve livelihoods in the developing world and the US on issues that include homelessness, wildlife conservation, and girls' education. She is also a founder of Kiwanja Imports, that imports handmade fair trade crafts and household decor produced by women's groups in Africa, India, and Mexico. And she also helped to establish the nonprofit organization Dance for the Earth, which utilizes dance and performance art to support the cultural and environmental preservation of Indigenous communities globally. Most recently, she helped to launch Amplify Girls, which is a collective of community-driven organizations working to localize global development and to invest in adolescent girls. She is well-enabled and trained in all of these various activities through her master's degree in international affairs from Columbia University. Next, I would like to introduce Katarina Kahlmann, who is the Chief Program Officer for TechnoServe, which is another one of our constituent organizations. As that officer, Katarina leads the operation of TechnoServe's offices around the world. She's been with TechnoServe, I believe, 13 years now, starting in 2010. She started as what they call a volunteer consultant in Haiti, working on the diagnostic phase of what was called the Haiti Hope Project. And later, they must have liked her work because she became TechnoServe's country director in Haiti, supporting the growth of the operation and a diversification of the portfolio in that country across mango and peanut sectors. Currently, she is based in Sweden and works with as the regional director for West Africa, or most recently was the regional director of West Africa prior to her position as Chief Program Officer, having served as a director on the strategic initiatives team, where she worked on developing and strengthening corporate partnerships in various sectors across Africa, India, and Latin America. And additionally, she also has filled some other functions at TechnoServe. She comes to TechnoServe with a Master of Science in International Economics from the Stockholm School of Economics, with a focus on international development. And last but very much not least, I'd like to introduce Sarah Shannon, who is the Executive Director of Hesperian Health Guides. Sarah has had several decades at Hesperian. I'm blanking on exactly how many, but I'm thinking it's over 25 years at Hesperian. Hesperian produces a series of grassroots healthcare manuals written at low levels of reading to help educate grassroots populations on their own healthcare. Their flagship book is called Where There Is No Doctor, and then they also have a book that's very near and dear to my heart because we supported for 7 years the production of this book, called A Community Guide to Environmental Health, which is now available in over 30 languages and provides tools for community level actions promoting human and planetary health. I will mention off the top that book, if anyone is interested in it due to today's topic, that book is available for purchase or free download online with an open copyright if there are particularly chapters that you would like to be able to go and access for your own programs. Sarah, before joining Hesperian, she spent 14 years in Central America, training hundreds of community health workers in both Honduras and El Salvador. And all of this work, she earned her awards from Core Group for the Dory Storms Child Survival Recognition Award and UCLA's Ruth Romer Social Justice Leadership Award. And I have also had the pleasure of working with Sarah for 9 years, very much elbow to elbow, let's say, when I served on the board of Hesperian, which was certainly a great privilege for me. With that, we'll delve into our discussion. And since I mentioned Sarah most recently, I'm gonna note we think about climate change as something that that is solely almost environmental. We don't think about what the effects of, we think about the effects on the planet before we think about the effects on people and particularly at the ground level. And so, Sarah, one of the things I don't think we focus on very much really is what are the health consequences to people of climate change? Often we think about the lack of water or rising tides and encroaching, but there are specific health needs that have to be addressed in coping with climate change. Would you tell us a little bit about that and your work in that area?
Certainly, and it's really a pleasure to be with so many folks and be on this panel. Thanks, Emily. Well, certainly, I think we're increasingly, the last few years have shown us the impacts on everyday life of climate change. Certainly, human health is one of those areas, and it is a broad range of topics. And one area that we're working in is trying to create informational tools that are really practical and accessible for people to deal with and address the health effects of climate change. But some of those very clearly are heat-related illness. So our Workers' Guide to Health and Safety, and in particular, talks about information of how to prevent and treat heat stroke and other heat-related issues. And that's, again, all of this content is free online, so we can kind of see also what people are most visiting. And this past summer, that information got a huge amount of usage because heat-related illness is just very, very real for all of us now. Another area of human health that I think maybe folks don't quite associate as clearly with climate change, however, is the spread of mosquito-borne illness. And that's because those diseases are spreading into new areas as a result of changing climate. So places where malaria wasn't as endemic now is. So malaria, dengue, Zika, and chikungunya are all mosquito-borne illnesses that are increasingly moving into new areas where people are less used to understanding what they are, preventing them, treating them. So information about that is really becoming very important. And we expect that particular trend to continue to escalate. And it's not just mosquitoes, of course, there's tick-borne illness and other related things where new diseases or existing diseases that are well known are spreading into new areas. So that's a whole other area in which we are working. There's many, many more. Essentially, climate change impacts sort of every aspect of our lives. I do want to talk also briefly about, or at least mention that in addition to addressing the health effects of climate change, mitigating climate change tends to be thought of as this very sort of abstract idea. And so what we're trying to do also is give people very concrete community level actions that benefit both the planet and human health. and certainly Community Guide to Environmental Health that we were able to develop with community-based groups around the world is one of those examples. And I look forward to talking about some of the ways that at a very practical level, people can be doing mitigating action. And then preventing as well, and advocacy. And I look forward to sharing a little bit more about the work that we are currently doing around fracking and plastics and human health. So that's just as an overview of some of the issues that we're working on that are related to climate change.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I look forward to hearing more about your work in all of those areas as well as we continue. It's interesting how you were talking about the mitigation of climate change, because Katarina, TechnoServe, I know, they just started a new 5-year, pardon me, 5-year strategic plan. And as a part of that plan, one of the major legs of that plan, let's say, is a project that I believe is called Regenerative 30. And that is about mitigating climate change. Would you share a little bit with us also about the work that TechnoServe is doing in that area?
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Emily, and thank you for the invitation to this session. For those of you who aren't as familiar with TechnoServe, we work in 31 countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. And our core belief is that all people in low-income communities deserve the right to build a better life. And the way we do that is by working with smallholder farmers and small businesses to help them increase their income, and now also build their resilience and benefit from a transition to a greener economy. That's why we launched our Regenerate 30 initiative, which is exactly what Emily mentioned. Our ambition is to, by 2030, help 30 million people to improve their incomes, build their resilience, and also mitigate 30 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions, and put 30 million acres of land under sustainable management. What does that mean more concretely? To achieve that, we work in 3 ways. We work with smallholder farmers. We help them adopt regenerative agricultural practices, which is often seen as a buzzword, but it's very concrete when you get down to it. It can be working with coffee farmers, helping them to plant shade trees, which is fantastic for the coffee, for the quality, for the productivity. It's also great as a way to bind carbon in the soil and in the trees. We also work in our second way through green accelerators with small growing businesses, helping them to scale green local solutions that both have good environmental impact, but also social impact. For example, in India, we work with an accelerator called Greener, with fast-growing, rather small, but fast-growing businesses. My favorite one there is a brick manufacturer. They used to produce traditional bricks, but now they switched to producing the bricks from recycled materials. And the new bricks are not only then more environmentally friendly, but they're also much lighter. They're very, very durable. And my favorite piece of it is that they're cheaper for the low-income communities that buy them. So it's really a win-win-win, if you like. And then the third way is we do a lot of work in food systems. And Sarah, I think this is a bridge between our 2 topics, right? Food systems are at stress. People often speak of them as broken, and yet they feed billions of people. So I don't know if they're entirely broken, right? But really important to mitigate the impact of climate change on them. And there we do a lot of work with food processors. They're a really great entry point if you want to impact food systems at scale. So specifically to your question around mitigation, Emily, there we work with them to source sustainably from thousands of smallholder farmers, and to help these farmers to adopt these regenerative practices to mitigate, but also to build resilience and adaptation. And we also work with them at their own business level, their operational level, to reduce waste and come up with smart products to the end consumer. I could go on for a very long time, but let me stop here. Very happy to share more, but I'll pause here.
That's fantastic, Katarina. I have a interesting, well, it's interesting to me, a question is will this project Regenerative 30 by 2030, in the next 7 years, I can hardly believe that's only 7 years away. Will that serve as any kind of example to other organizations in either the for-profit or the nonprofit sector? Are there plans to roll that out to other organizations, let's say?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And I'd say even more than that, it's all going to happen through partnerships. And we're already well underway with this. It is keeping us up at night. It's so soon, but it's much needed. We all need to take drastic action. We are working with local organizations in the countries where we work. Our clients are, of course, kind of guiding our work. Their needs are the guiding light of our work. Very often our staff come from these communities. So that's the two types of most important partnerships for ours. And then, of course, we work with the private sector, both in the countries where we work, but also internationally. So we, for example, work with Nespresso, we work with Danone and other companies that are committed to regenerative agriculture and to sustainability, and then prepare to support their supply chains to make this big transition. We also work with academia to, for example, bring in technological advances, AI, for example, to really help support this shift.
Fantastic. And quick follow-up question to you on that. Are there other nonprofit or non-governmental organizations that you know of that are doing work in this area as well?
A lot, yes. And I think we are in the nexus between economic development and environmental improvements.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important to see the synergies between the two. We just had a debate about an Economist article a few days ago where they basically draw this as a dichotomy, and we have to choose economic development or kind of a planet that is livable for future generations. And I refuse to kind of see that as a choice. We need both, right? So at a global level, TechnoServe is working with WWF, with Conservation International, and many environmental organizations that are investing more now in economic development for the communities where they serve. But then, as I mentioned, really importantly, we also work with local organizations in the communities where we work to help them create this change. As an example, in Peru, we work with cooperatives, farming cooperatives, and we help them to develop green fertilizers, biological fertilizers, because their communities haven't had access for some time to affordable synthetic fertilizers because of the global fertilizer crisis. And these are really good for the farmers. They're cheaper, but they're also excellent for the environment. So both at local level, but also at global level, that kind of partnership with other nonprofits is really important.
Very good. And I'm going to ask one tweak on that question, which would be, other organizations like TechnoServe, are there other ones out there doing similar projects that you know of? And the answer may be no, I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
I am happy to say yes. This is a really important transition. We've been doing this for quite some time, especially in agriculture, less so in small and growing businesses, but that's really kind of speeding up now. And we build on decades of work in this space, and I'm really happy to see other organizations also catching on, much because of the needs from we call them clients, so the farmers, the communities, the small businesses that we work with, but also increasingly from consumers, which is lovely to see. So a lot of the corporate partners we work with, they also work with other NGOs. And these corporate partners, they have very clear mandates from all of us buying the products, right? And choosing greener products. So yes, there's many forces coming together, and I see the industry moving at large.
Which is wonderful. It sounds like those of us not at that industry level perhaps need to be better educated or find the ways to educate ourselves as to who are supplying green products more and more, if as a way for us to express our concern and appreciation of the work that's being done through through our purchasing dollars.
Exactly.
So,
and Emily, I'll just add one more thing, which is, although I see momentum now, we see momentum now, when it comes to actual action on the ground, we need to speed up, clearly. And also when it comes to measuring the impacts, there I see it's way too nascent and a lack of movements. So as I don't want to paint too kind of glossy a picture.
No, we have a lot of work to get done on the planet before we can relax about it. I'm gonna turn to Laura now, because Katarina and Sarah, you are both working in very different ways at the macro level of this issue. Laura, Sega Girls School is working at what I would say is the micro level with your local school and the girls who attend it, and also outreach, I believe, to the villages those girls come from in Tanzania or Tanzania, depending on how well I'm pronouncing it like a Tanzanian that day, which is usually pretty poor. So I apologize to any Tanzanians who are here for my mispronunciation of that word, of the name of their country. Would you tell us about the work that's been done at Sega Girls School?
Yes, thank you. And thank you also, Emily, for including us. We're really happy to be here, and I'm thrilled to learn about these other programs as well. But I thought maybe I could back up a little and just share a little bit about the problem in terms of the impact on women and girls. As many of you may know, that research shows that women and girls are probably one of the biggest, part of the population that is negatively impacted by climate change, with 80% of the people displaced by climate change being women and girls. And then also the impact on girls' education is really huge, with, anything from, droughts to other environmental impacts that often end up pulling girls out of school. And so, the Malala Fund estimated that in 2021, climate-related events prevented at least 4 million girls from completing their education. And if you continue on that track, or if we continue on that track, that by 2025, that number will be up to 12.5 million girls who would be pulled out of school because of climate-related issues. So the converse of that is that there has been a lot of research now to show that there's a really positive impact around educating girls and climate change. So I was sharing some of the statistics around that with Emily, and I'll just share a couple of quotes, but then I'll share more about what we're doing specifically. But resilience.org ranks educating girls as an unrecognized but more effective climate solution than electric cars, solar, and wind power. And I don't know if people know about Project Drawdown, which is a nonprofit that seeks to help the world stop climate change as quickly and safely and equitably as possible. And they also have a book by the same name with the top 100 things that solutions to climate change. And they have named girls' education as number 6 on that list. So there's a lot around the importance of educating girls. And so Nurturing Minds and our partner SEGA, which is Secondary Education for Girls Advancement, have for the past, this is our 15th year of operation, and we have been focused obviously on educating girls. They do that through 3 different programs, and there is the SEGA Girls School, which educates about 300 highly vulnerable girls a year. But the overall SEGA's programs reach about 2,500 girls throughout the country. And as Emily mentioned, we have the Modern Girl Community Outreach Program that also brings our life skills program primarily, but also some financial literacy to nearly 2,000 girls in 29 communities, and that grows by 3 to 5 communities a year. But
Wow.
from the beginning, we, obviously having a holistic education is part of our mission, but specifically, we always wanted to have an environmentally sustainable school as well. So on top of simply educating girls, which has a lot of positive outcomes, we do teach all of our students about organic gardening. So they learn that deep permaculture right on the campus, and that provides nearly half of all of the produce for the school. The school is completely run on solar power, and we also have a rainwater catchment system, but they also, compost and recycle, of course, and they have conservation minded clubs after school, like an anti-elephant ivory club and other nature clubs. And then they also, most recently, we started a carbon offset program, because we do encourage visitors to come to the school. And so we have partnered with Carbon Tanzania to try to offset some of the impact of having visitors come from so far away. So those are some of the sort of the side of the sustainable campus and how we further increase the impact of educating girls and young women. But obviously a huge part of that is also learning about reproductive health. So that is something that the students learn in their life skills classes. And so they are, better able to then make decisions about their own reproductive health. And when girls and then young women are educated, they tend to have fewer children as well, having that ripple effect. Those are some of the ways. We also added a solar education component and gave out 1,500 solar lamps through the Modern Girl Community Outreach Program, which is one of the ways in which we have sort of continued to reach more and more adolescent girls through the country, because we have these clubs on weekends, and we are teaching that same reproductive health, communication skills, human rights, so that girls understand their rights and understand their bodies, and can make those decisions better. So that program also brought solar education to them in the past year, and we'll continue to do that and spread that as time goes on. And then the other big component that we think is really important is increased STEM learning. I noticed there was somebody on the call that does a lot of STEM learning as well. So I took down your name. I'll follow up with you. But we do now, this is the second year, was this past summer. It's part of the Tanzanian curriculum to teach science, of course, but really encouraging girls to go into science careers is part of why we are focusing on STEM with them. And so it really makes science more exciting. And then by the second year of their high school program, they have to choose what sort of track they're going to follow, if they're going to do science or business or liberal arts. And so we want to encourage more science careers and more leadership in science, because again, there is a lot of data that shows, when there are more women in leadership positions, for example, the whole country can do better in climate. When women are educated around better agricultural practices, then that also has a really positive impact on climate as well. So all of those various things contribute to having really putting an extra focus on girls' education as part of the climate solution.
Fantastic. That was a lot of information. I'm not sure you listed everything individually. I think you told me in the conversation we had prior to today about this convening that SEGA is now completely sustainable. Is energy sustainable? Is that correct?
Yeah, so the Sega Girls School, we consider it, yes, a sustainable campus for all of the reasons that I mentioned, between the solar and, having rainwater catchment, and also being, having their own organic gardens and teaching about organic gardening and all of that. So we do have a highly sustainable campus. Yes.
That's tremendous. That again, it shows, I think, what smaller organizations can do in making communities or schools or small villages more energy sustainable. And as you're trying to cope with the effects that are already occurring from climate change, until we get some of these solutions that, for example, Katarina and TechnoServe are working on, and while they're also waiting for information to reach them from organizations like Hesperian, with books like an environmental guide or community guide to environmental health. Sorry about that mix up. And also even the things like, and then the STEM education could be highly applicable to things that Sarah was talking about, like your work with fracking and plastics. Sarah, do you see a connection there as well?
Certainly. I mean, I think one of the things that we're learning, all of us, around climate change is how interconnected these issues are. I think all of our descriptions are sort of making that point, that it's connected to women and girls empowerment and education, and certainly, all kinds of development models and the kind of work that companies have to be doing, and at a community level, people have to be undertaking. So I actually see with some hope the fact that we're breaking down some of the silos that I think have constrained our ability to take real action around addressing climate change. So I'm actually optimistic because of that. I'd love to sort of focus on, I think some of the things that we're identifying are where there's wins both at a human health or a well-being level and at a climate change level more largely. And I think that is one of the things that we're all working on, that I wanted to just sort of focus on a little bit. And certainly Community Guide to Environmental Health is a really useful resource for that. I'll put in that pitch. And I put in a link to it in where you can see it online and sort of cruise through it. But it contains a real collection of what communities are doing at a very sort of like concrete way to both benefit the health of that community and also the health of the planet. So like things as basic as composting toilets. But instead of using flush toilets that use a huge amount of water, lead to sewage treatment that also uses chemicals, this actually produces fertilizer. So, where it's applicable, it's a very specific, easy to do sort of action. The same with mosquito abatement methods that don't require pesticides, sustainable agriculture practices like Katarina was speaking about, where people can both get better crop yield and also reduce pesticides and improve the health of the soil. So there's ways in which they're very concrete things where, the knowledge is there, but often needs to be shared more widely and sort of people encouraged to undertake those kinds of things. So these are all really practical actions that can and, are hopefully inspiring for people to really be able to say, okay, I can do this thing, I can do this thing, I can do this thing at a community level. But, I think the other thing that we're recognizing is that we also have to address things at a sort of a larger level. And that's where one of our projects, this project that we're currently working on around fracking and plastics, comes in. When we developed Community Guide to Environmental Health, we definitely were addressing fossil fuel use and extraction, but fracking was still quite a new practice and was not included in that resource. and partners who helped us develop that book have since said, oh my gosh, fracking is here. How do we deal with the health effects of it? And so we're and how do we organize using the health effects as one way to sort of address fracking as a process? So I don't know if folks are probably aware of what fracking is, but I mean, the super short is it's the extraction of natural gas using hydraulic fracturing. So liquid chemicals are injected at high force into rock where gas deposits are. That's the basic thing of what it is. But what is less understood is all of the health effects all the way along the process, from extraction all the way to where often those gases are produced into plastics. So extraction, although it's treated like trade secrets, so it's very hard to get the specific chemical composition, what we do know is that the chemicals being used in the extraction process itself that are injected into the ground contain PFAS, the forever chemicals that are both known carcinogens and hormonal disrupting, and they never break down. So that's just one element of the chemicals that are being injected into the soil for fracking, into the rock for fracking. And then at another stage, there's the cracking plants where and sorry, not to get super technical here, but the molecule, the gas is broken into both ethane and methane, often flared, often other things. And there's a new plant that was built in Pennsylvania that self-reports every month that the level of flaring and the toxic chemical that exceeds the annual limit every single month. And that's just a single plant. So, that's another issue. And then I think the thing that I was surprised to learn about when we first started this, and I think many of us are still surprised to understand, is that much of the resulting product from fracked gas doesn't actually go to heating. It's not used as a fuel. It's converted into single-use plastics, which bring their own health hazards that I think we're maybe more aware of, not around the usage of that, but then also the disposal of that. So there's this arc of health harms all the way through the life cycle of these of this process. And we're currently working on developing something that's really simple, or not really simple, because it's not a simple set of processes, but really accessible and clear and practical for folks to be able to make those connections. Mm-hmm. And I think that's necessary to be able to make change happen, not just at a community level, although that's super important, but also begin to do things that are larger levels of advocacy that are really necessary.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one of the interesting things I'm hearing here, apart from your very excellent description of fracking and what those gases are used for, which is really helpful because I certainly am learning from this conversation as well, is but the idea that these things are not all siloed from one another. And because I do think that we tend to think of them as being siloed from one another. And that we do tend to think, we hear, for example, in the US, I don't know how it is in the global South, but in the US, we hear a lot about recycling, but 75% of things that people put to recycle don't become recycled because they haven't been properly prepared in the household for recycling. Even just rinsing out that can of Diet Coke that you have, which we shouldn't drink anyway, but that can of Diet Coke or your water bottle. And then I personally, for example, think it should now be a law that those plastic things they wrap around the bottle they shouldn't be glued to the bottle anymore, because it makes it so hard to get the plastic wrapper off the bottle. And the ones that I appreciate so much, the ones that I'm recycling, where I can just take a knife or a pair of scissors, slide it up, cut it, and it just is only attached to itself. So you cut it in one place and the whole thing comes right up. That ought to be mandated that they have to do it that way. I would gladly pay 2 cents more for whatever soft drink or sport water I'm having, to not have to try and take a knife and slit my thumb open by trying to remove the tail end of that wrapper. So that's just a personal peeve. But you see what I'm saying is 75% of us don't know that we need to take that wrapper off, or that the things that you're recycling need to be rinsed out before they go into your recycling bin. So education also very, very key here. Lara, I want to come back to you for a second and ask, now the young women at Sega Girls School, are they able to carry these practices back? I know you talked about the solar lanterns, and I think those were distributed in communities, if I'm not mistaken. But are they able to take these lessons back that they're learning at Sega Girls School to their communities? And how is that information being disseminated?
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent question. And yes, I mean, we hear all the time from our students, our graduates too. I just spent 5 weeks with 2 of our graduates who are about to head to university. And they shared how they brought this back to their communities to, they go back and essentially become mentors in their local communities. They share with their sisters, their cousins, their mothers, not only, sustainable agricultural practices that they learned at the school, but also things about reproductive health. And so, I mean, those are things that, sometimes we think, oh, we pass it down from mother to daughter, from one generation to the next. But in certain cultures, and it turns out in many places in Tanzania, that's not actually done. And so there is a lot of misinformation, or just a void of information for girls and young women about things like reproductive health. And so so that is, I mean, yes, we think there's a massive ripple effect by the young women going back and sharing that in their community. And we also, I should mention, teach entrepreneurship, which does also have an impact. It's not what you might think as directly, but when a young woman has the ability to make income, she is less reliant on men, and she's less sort of predisposed to being a victim when she has low on resources to do something like trade sex for food, for example, which then, leaves her in a much better position, again, to make her own decisions about her own reproductive health. So that is something that the young women that I traveled with talked a lot about, the importance of that. And that's also why, as part of that Modern Girl Community Outreach Program, not only are we teaching all about reproductive health, but we actually also do a lot of financial literacy and product development and entrepreneurship as part of the program too.
Tremendous. And so I think that's some of the impact is on the school itself, but there's a greater impact as that branches out and filters out to these. And as you said, you add 2 to 3 new communities each year, so you're broadening the base line of knowledge in the area of Tanzania where you work. And Sarah, the impact, I think, of your work is people being able to control their own health better, and also to advocate for their own health better by having knowledge. As the saying goes, knowledge is power, and that's partly true. There needs to be other means of empowerment for people of the global South as well, but knowledge is a great starting point. And so, Katarina, I've not been meaning to ignore you, but we've had such a wealth of information coming out here. But I want to come back to you and say, we know about the Regenerative 30 program, and the mitigating the effects of 30 million tons of greenhouse gases and affecting 30 million acres of farmland and 30 million people in the global South. But for example, the impact of removing or mitigating 30 million tons of greenhouse gases Are there numbers that you're able to tell us about what that kind of ultimate impact from a large program is, for example? I think you're muted.
Yes,
There you
yes,
go.
absolutely. Indeed. And we take measurement extremely seriously. So we built this numbers bottom up based on what we already are doing today, but then scaling it. And then we measure it across many of our projects today, and we'll do so even more going forward. That said, to really understand TechnoServe, I think it's really important to understand what motivates us, and that's the people, right? So we're speaking of scaling, and that's really, really important. But Laura, just like you described, like you start with the girls in the school, and then you scale from there, and that's so important to really understand how this drives a change at an individual level. Education is really important. And for behaviors to change, Emily, this might be like putting that bottle in the recycling, and don't tell anybody, but I'm a really bad recycler, so I shouldn't be on this call. But we need incentives, and we need support there, right? So for us, it's very important to understand the incentives and the business case for the communities we work with. I just met with an Ethiopian farmer called Fadila a while back, and she said very rightly that farmers don't do mitigation or adaptation. They do what makes sense for them. They do what makes sense for their soil and for their businesses. And that really rang true with me. And then she told her story that really illustrated that. She had very old coffee trees that weren't producing much anymore. And then she very reluctantly joined a TechnoServe program, not at all sure that she wanted to change any of her behavior, but she started to see her neighbors increasing their yields. So then after some time, she dared picking up on these new practices. And the most drastic one is stumping. If you cut a tree, a coffee tree in this case, it can grow back relatively quickly if you do it in the right way in only a couple of years, and it becomes much more productive. If you do that together with the shade trees that I mentioned earlier and a few other practices, it's fantastic for her income. She increased her productivity by 10 times, her yields by 10 times. And also it's great for mitigation as per what you asked about, Emily. So a lot of the mitigation in those big numbers that I'm driven with, all of it, I'd say, is driven by these behavioral changes at a micro level, really understanding what drives behaviors and how we then can replicate that across many different farmers, many different businesses. And the key to that, you already mentioned it, Sarah, is this synergy between what's good for people and what's good for the environment. I think very few of us do only things that are good for the environment. We try, but then very often we need that kind of incentive as a personal nudge.
True. Well, it is 12:50, so I am going to bring our general conversation to a close, but I want to throw the room open to everyone else. Please, I should have mentioned this earlier. Put your hand up using your either your actual hand or the little marker on your Zoom box, or type a question that you might have into the chat box, and we would love for you to. Gordon, I see you. Would you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, and thank you, Emily. This is Gordon from Foundation for Community Development and Empowerment in Uganda. And
hello, Gordon.
We are working. Yes, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Emily. Yeah, good evening, everyone. This is Gordon from Uganda. I work with Foundation for Community Development and Empowerment, and we administer climate change focused grants on behalf of the Conference Institute East Africa. Of course, I'm happy to hear all this, but specifically, I want to comment about the issue of climate change and health. In Uganda, there is too much focus on livelihood. The health aspect is not so much considered when you talk about climate change. And I think it's the issue of poverty and, of course, food safety. So everything is being done, but at the expense of health. But from the health perspective, we've seen, an increase in terms of respiratory infections that are emanating from the poor quality of air because of the economic activities, the industries. Then we are seeing an emergence in terms of nutrition-related diseases because of a reduction in food production, in food safety. We are also seeing a number of issues that are being caused by a reduction in the quality of water because of poor disposal, poor, both domestic and urban waste management. But all this, you don't see a lot of effort maybe from the private sector, from the NGO, from government, from the health perspective. It's still so much focused, as I said, on livelihood. We live in a malaria endemic country, but we are seeing a surge in malaria cases. And now there is a talk about, resistance of malaria in terms of the available medication prophylaxis. And I think it's high time that we need, or we start looking or promoting also climate change from the health perspective, especially in the developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Gordon. And Anastasia, I see you have your hand up.
Everyone. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I'm happy to see everyone that I almost saw all at the OC. I want to thank you for all the great things that you are doing in different countries. Our organization is called Our Lady of Perpetual Support for people living with AIDS and orphans. We deal with the women and we deal with them, with adolescents and youth. This is a place where the girls become pregnant in order for survival, early pregnancy. I'm wondering, I'm not hearing any of you working in Western Kenya. You do a lot of things that when you come to Kenya, I can hear about Sega, and other countries. Please.
Well, thank you, Anastasia. I saw in the chat box that you had noted you are looking for partners, and yes, you are in Western Kenya, and we will be sending out a copy of a link to this video, which will also have the chat information that has your request, and also has your email address at anastasia@olpskenya.org. And so if anyone's able to reach out to Anastasia to share information or partnership with her, I know she would definitely appreciate that. And so this is a good place to network for those kind of collaborations. So thanks for reaching out. Does anyone
just
else
to add, Anastasia, thank you for that. We do work all over Kenya, including in Western Kenya since decades back. So would love to connect to speak more about sustainable business, but also very much women economic and women empowerment in general. Just like Laura mentioned before, women are so much more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and nature loss. So, and the link to between the economics of it and the health aspects are so clear. So very happy to connect on that.
Yeah, and I will add that I'm also. Yeah, and Anastasia, I will also add that while we just work in Tanzania, I am very happy to share other resources and connect you with others like Amplify Girls and others who are working in Kenya specifically. So I can do that offline. Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. That's a great.
I would be happy to collaborate with them.
Something that I want to jump in and mention as another resource for people, because Laura, you were mentioning project, I'm blanking on the name of it. Project Drawdown. But another another resource for information on what people can do themselves or with their programs, I believe is resilience.org, which you had also mentioned to me. So Emily Rice, would you put that in the chat? www.resilience.org, I believe is correct for their website, so that people can look and find other resources, because we knew that in an hour we were not going to have time to really do more than dip a toe into what the needs are and what types of things are being done and can further be done. But we knew this was a huge area of interest for our general, let's say, sphere of our sphere of contacts, our network of people that attend these conversations and convenings. And so it is 12:58. I've got time if one more person has any question or comment they'd like to make.
Emily, we do have a question for Laura in the chat.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes, it's from Livingstone, and it says, Laura, thanks for sharing. I wanted to learn how you are engaging caregivers for girls in adopting the good models taught at schools.
Okay, thank you so much. So we actually do have, caregiver days, essentially, where we bring a couple of times a year, we'll bring caregivers to the school and share information with them, or if they live too far afield from the school, they'll do community meetings and share that information. But truly, the bigger ripple effects that we're able to share is through the Modern Girl Community Outreach meeting that happens. It's a year-long program that works with adolescent girls. And so their families are a little bit, tied to that as well. They're very aware of the curriculum because they have to approve that their children or the children they care for are able to be a part of that. And that meets every single weekend, and it covers everything around reproductive health and also financial literacy, as I mentioned. And then further, there is that ripple effect of the graduates and students going home and just sharing information they've learned with their families and communities. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I saw another question in the chat, but I think it was for Katarina from Andrea Johnson about how TechnoServe identifies farmers to work with and they'd love to get connected. But I see Katarina already picked that up in the chat and has shared her email with you, Andrea, so that the two of you can be connected. I'm just because just to make sure everybody got had a question. Oh, Dunya, do you have a question? Dunya, you're on mute. You're still on mute.
Hello, Emily.
There you go.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, I'm Dunya. I'm Dunya from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I'm the founder and the executive director of ENGO, which called the Vision Globale d'Orientation des Jeunes, means a global vision of youth orientation. We work with young boys and the young girls, and we are developing a program of educating youth on how to protect the environment. And according to that, because human has got the right of a good environment, a safe environment, and we teach youth, girls and boys, on how they must work in their local community to protect their local environment. Even if the local environment, it protects all the world. And in the protection of the environment, we develop with them small ideas as solutions, and the youth develop those ideas at small enterprises. Means we work in the context of environmental education protection and environmental entrepreneurship program. Means we educate to protect environment, and we accompany youth to develop small ideas as small enterprises for protecting our environment. Now we would like to know, and we appreciate this opportunity to connect with other organizations which are working in the same area as our organization. We would like to know with which organization we can partner so that we can have a big impact through youngs with who we are working together, how we can make a big impact in our community as environmental educator and in the process of creating solutions through environmental small enterprises. Means education and entrepreneurship for protecting the environment. We need to stay in contact, in connection with others, so we can be able to have a big impact in our community. As you know, the safe environment in DRC can contribute to protect all. That is the idea I had for sharing with others. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Any comments on that? And are there any other questions people had before we sign off? Very good. I really appreciate everyone's time. Oh, I'm sorry, Beatrice, you have a question.
Sorry, Emily, I will be very quick. I just
That's
wanted
fine.
to, I think it will be a nice segue into what you're probably going to say, but I would love it if we could have a part 2 of this conversation, because I'm a processor. I process and think, and so I'd love to have a part 2, because there's so much that I would like to contribute to the conversation, and there's so many things that that are different and moving at the ground level. It's so dynamic. So I'd love to have a second part of this conversation. Thank you.
We definitely think we could have a second part of this conversation. As I noted, we really only knew we would be scratching the surface. I see a couple different people here that we support at the foundation, such as Plant with Purpose. McKinley, I saw you there. And we also partner with an organization that works in extreme poverty-stricken areas in Nicaragua with sustainable energy solutions, again, such as was it compostable or was it collapsible toilets? But that Sarah had mentioned. And so we wanted to kind of stay away from things like immediate planting of trees and things like that. But there's sustainable agriculture. There's more in the health arena. There's more in all of these areas that we can talk about in future convenings. And I would love to talk with you, Beatrice, and get your input. So we'll on what those should be. So we'll be in touch, definitely. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And just to, Emily, a fast pitch. Hesperian develops all of our content collaboratively with folks that are doing great work on the ground. So we're looking for partners working on mental health, community-based approaches to mental health. The fracking project, if you're working anywhere that's affected by that. And ongoing work around reproductive health and environmental health. So reach out to me. I put my email in the chat, and thank you.
And Sarah will be sure with our link that we send out that we will send a direct link with your email address for that as well, because you had told us in a previous convening about your work in the mental health arena. I think that's an area we didn't even have time to touch on today, about how mental health is affected by all of these things. I know my mental health is affected worrying about this stuff all the time. And so again, it's great to have partners for Hesperian to review and provide input for these books and future books. So please feel free to reach out to Sarah. She really, really means it when she asks for that assistance. Well, very good. Well, I want to thank all of our speakers today, Sarah and Laura and Katarina. Thank you so much for your time and your information and your passion for what you're doing. They mean the world to us at the West Foundation, and they provide us with a source of our own sustainability for the work that our own sustained passion for what we do. You provide the fuel for that. And thank you to everyone who attended today. We do have these convenings once a quarter. If you attended today, you're automatically on our list to hear about future convenings. Probably the next one will be sometime in late January, early February. And we have not yet determined topics for the convenings for 2024. We will probably also be sending out an email. So if they're saying, hey, would you like to tell us what you'd like to hear about? And so we will definitely be in touch. Please send us your ideas, such as what Beatrice just mentioned. And also, please, when we are going to send out a request for feedback on this session, so please do fill out that brief query for us, that and we will take all of your comments to heart. So thank you again for being with us, and it's great. It was great to have all of you here, and best of luck with all your work. And we will look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.